Hello everybody and welcome again to Blick Art Materials Live. I'm Julie, your host tonight, and I want to just say thank you so much. I know so many of you join us here every week, and I hope it's because you're really getting a lot of inspiration out of these Facebook Lives that you see. I know that you're hoping and crossing your fingers that you might get the gift certificate too, but it's really a pleasure to have you here and to be able to converse with you in the chat. Welcome again to another great demo tonight, I hope, with silk painting. Now, before we get started, let's open up our conversation. And we do give away a $100 e-gift certificate. And the only way to get entered for that drawing is to be able to like us, first of all, and follow us on Facebook. And then also, tonight I'd love for you to tell us about wearable art. That's our topic tonight, silk painting, but wearable art can encompass anything. I mean, we're talking jewelry, knitting, crocheting, of course, clothing design, Nicolas Cave maybe, any kind of wearable art or artist. I'll throw that in there too. But while we're watching this demo tonight and waiting for the drawing to take place, let's talk, shall we? Let's hear what your take and your favorite wearable art form or artist, and let's get into silk painting. Now, I kind of like to give an introduction to a certain technique. When we say silk painting, of course, it's like any other media that's out there. You've got a wide variety of techniques and materials and processes, and we're just not going to show everything at once. So I kind of like to start with some very basic things. So I gear this for either the beginner or some of you artists who are already doing great work and love watercolors and oils and acrylics and painting in other mediums. But you've always kind of looked at silk painting and thought, I would like to give that a try. But maybe there's something about it that intimidates you, or you're just not sure about the materials. Tonight I'd like to introduce you to a real easy, simple, and fun way to do silk painting with just very few materials. So let's start out and talk about some of those materials. Now, the first thing we're going to use is we're going to use a silk scarf, and we are going to use a small one. This is just a 22 by 22. Going to be real easy to work with in a demo situation, but we also have larger ones and long ones that are narrower so that they can wrap around the neck more like a traditional scarf. But this is the perfect size for neckwear, like what I have on, or perhaps to wear around your head. And it will go very quickly as well because we don't have as much space to cover. Now let's talk about the colors that we're going to use too. This is Dynaflow. Dynaflow is a jacquard. The silk is jacquard, from jacquard as well. Dynaflow is a fabric paint from jacquard, and it's not a silk dye. Silk dyes are something completely different. Silk dyes you usually need to use with a resist, and they need to be steamed, and they definitely, the scarf should definitely need to be stretched. So that kind of goes into higher levels of silk painting. This is a very beginning technique, so we're going to use this real soft body fabric paint called Dynaflow that we can heat set when it's done. We don't need to do any special steaming or any special process to set the color onto the fabric. All we're going to need to use is an iron or even throw it in the dryer. So it's real easy to use. Also, we're going to be using, here's my brushes up here. A very soft brush. This is our Utrecht watercolor wash. It's a synthetic brush, but it just has a lot of give. It's very soft. I'm going to be using two sizes of square wash brushes, so a smaller one and a larger one. So something in that vein with brushes. And really that's about all we need. So let's go ahead and get started. Just back up for a minute here if you're just getting in a little bit late. Our topic tonight is wearable art. And we're talking about different kinds of wearable art, not just silk scarves like I'm demoing here, but also knitted hats and mittens and painted tennis shoes, and any kind of jewelry actually is wearable art as well. So let's throw out conversations on your favorite type of wearable art while I get some paint out and some water. Okay, we're going to first of all start out with a background, and that's not the color I want. If I keep everything down there, I'm really hoping that I won't spill. But you gotta know me. Okay, I'm gonna use a dropper to just move a little bit of color into a little cup. And I know that's off to the side and you're not able to see it, but I worry about putting it here. Let me move this up a bit. Then we can see what we're up to. All right, and I'm going to add some water. You can either pour it from the container, or I'm going to just use the dropper as well. This is a turquoise color. Dynaflow comes in many, many wonderful colors. Okay. My mixture here is about 50-50 at this point, and I'm even going to make that a little thinner than that. It's very, very watered down. Okay, now spread my scarf back out again. Let's wet down the silk. Now, if we were actually doing watercolor on paper, we would stretch the paper. So in this step, we're kind of stretching the silk. We are doing so by wetting it down thoroughly. You saw all of the wrinkles that were in there when I first started, and just by saturating this with some water, I'm getting those wrinkles out. So there was absolutely no reason for me to iron it ahead of time. Again, that's kind of a lazy way of doing things, I suppose, but I call it time efficiency. That sounds better than laziness. Okay, I'm getting it very wet, and now let's think about doing a watercolor wash. So we're just taking that watered down teal color and brushing it across the background, allowing it to flow into itself and to spread out like so. Now, I know some of you guys are going to have questions about this, so please ask questions. We're going to be right there in the chat to answer anything you might have. One question I bet somebody is going to ask is, can I just use a spray bottle? And yes, as a matter of fact, you can. You can use a spray bottle. However, this part is not just wetting the fabric. This step is also moving the wrinkles back out of the fabric as much as we can here. So it's stretching it as well. And sometimes that requires a little more water than you get out of a spray bottle. Like I just had to add a little water up there at the top. But it will need brushwork, not just spraying and adding color. I'm not being too concerned about how the wash is going down here. Some areas might be darker, some areas lighter. This is going to be the background. So we're not too concerned about the background. while I'm doing this, I also want to point out the piece that's right here on my right, your left. This is a scarf that I did. I'm going to be doing that same kind of design, geometric, watercolor, squares and rectangles. I'm going to aim for that same design, but this is stretched. You'll notice that it's on wooden stretcher bar frames. These are the stretcher bars that you would use for stretching your own canvas. If with the 22 by 22 scarf, I found that 24-inch stretcher bars worked really well. And I pinned the silk with these little ASA pins, I think they're called. That stretched the scarf, but as it would get wet, it would sink down as well. So when I did that piece right there, I still kept the plastic board underneath here. And you know what? I did not cover that board, did I? We'll get there. I still kept it underneath here, but I had it stretched first. If you're not interested in using these pins, you could use some tacks. They're a little harder on the silk, might tear it actually and create too big of a hole. But I didn't have some at home when I made this scarf the other day, and I actually used duct tape. Yeah, I had to go back in and repaint some of the edges where the duct tape covered it, so it wasn't perfect, but in a pinch, it is a solution. All right. Yeah, I knew there was something more that I wanted to mention in the materials, and I forgot. So underneath here, I have a piece of plastic poster board. Kind of an unusual item. It really is just, and I'm going to hopefully show you guys up here from the front. It has a bit of a shine on one side. The side that I'm using has a little bit of a texture, so it seems more of a matte finish. And it's of course used for outdoor signage, paper sculpture, that kind of thing. But I have discovered that it's just super great for covering your tabletop and for protecting it. And let me show you the next great thing about it is now that I have finished painting the background of my scarf, I would go put this somewhere to dry. And in this case, I have a cart right here that I'm going to hang it on. And I'm going to clean my surface. Because it's plastic, I'm able to just clean it off very, very easily. Like so, with a paper towel and drying it at the same time. About knocking over my scarf there. And if you need to, you could add a little water too to move the color around. But this is important because as I move to my next step, I want a clean surface. And it's super easy to just wipe it down. I have a place where there was a little adhesive on the label. Don't you love those things? They are the bane of my existence. All right, so here is one that has dried, and it doesn't take long. I mean, if I hang that there for about 30 minutes, it's probably dry. You could speed matters up and use a hair dryer. You could put it in front of a fan, hang it out in the sunlight, anything like that to speed it up, but it doesn't take long at all. So we'll just spread this out and go on to the next step. So I'm going to build this up in layers because one of the things about Dynaflow is that if you put it on thickly, like straight out of the jar, it does add just a little bit of heaviness to it. And the beauty of silk is, of course, that it is so lightweight. And we just don't want to mess with that too much, and we want it to be comfortable. So I'm going to build it up in light layers of watered down color. All right, so I had this mixture about 50-50 of, and I added a little bit more. So I'm going to add a couple more droppers so that I have that 50-50 mixture about. And I'm estimating, you're fine estimating. I'm not saying it has to be an exact mixture, but around 50-50. And I'm going to keep the colors rather simple, just 3 colors. So along with our turquoise, we're going to use some kind of an ultramarine, we're calling it azure blue. And we also have, let's see, some emerald green. So getting the paint out here to be ready, and then let's add some water. I used about 3 on that, and I've got some more water under here. And about 3, I think, on that. Doesn't hurt to add a little bit more, and I'll probably be dipping my brush in and adding more anyway. All right. So let's get our nice square brush here. I'm going to dip that in the water, and then I get that over here under the camera. Do you see how I'm taking the water off of the brush just on the edge like that? I don't want to add more and more water to my paint, so I just want to wipe off as much as I can. Okay, I'm just starting down here in the corner, and I am creating a very light square shape. This is running into the fabric a little faster than I'd like, so I think I will add a little bit more to that mixture that I was guessing on anyway. Make it a little darker. And then randomly, kind of around the scarf, we're going to create shapes. This is one reason why I love using the square brush, because I can get the vertical stroke, the horizontal stroke, and then I just kind of fill in the middle. And I'm just going to put a few random squares and rectangles in this color around the scarf. Oh, I'm really enjoying seeing all of the ideas that you guys have for wearable art, and that's how we're getting entered into our drawing for a $100 gift coupon, is talking about wearable art. I think I've always loved the look of a silk scarf, definitely, but I don't wear many scarves anymore. Maybe I'll start doing it again, especially if I am displaying my own artwork on it. I need to start doing that. There's just something about a scarf, though. Not only is it pretty, so you have the visual beauty of it, but the texture of it, it's soft and flowing, and sometimes it might pick up the scent of your perfume off of your neck. So you have a olfactory pleasure from that. So I guess what I'm saying is silk really appeals to all the senses. Okay. Now you see that I dribbled a little bit. I don't know, can we see that from the camera off to the side? Okay, good. I was going to say, if not, take my word for it. There's a little bit of dribble from the side there. And that's okay, because we are going to be layering colors over colors. And so I could simply come in with another block of another color and cover up any, I'd say mistakes, but you know what? It's not really much of a mistake at all. It just can be worked in as part of the beauty of the artwork. Now I am purposefully leaving about an inch or more between color blocks. All right, do I trust myself? I'm gonna avoid dribbling by moving this over. Sometimes I trust myself to do things and I regret it later, but I think I can do it this time. I really don't have a plan. I'm just filling this out with a variety of squarish, rectangular-ish shapes. That one got a little close, that's okay. Let's see, maybe one over here. See, I did drip a little bit into my teal. Look at it, just spread on out. You'll never know it's there. Okay, now I'm going to put in this, just wash my brush out a little bit, get the water off of it. I don't want to add any more water unless I need to. And the next color is going to be a light green, lightish green. So I'm just going to come in some of these spaces here and fill that with a lighter green. In fact, I think I'd like a little lighter green than that even. So I added just a brush full of water, and that makes it a little bit, it's like watercolor. When you add water, it makes it a little thinner, which makes it a little lighter on the fabric. All right, now I'd probably maybe continue with a little bit more, but I want to leave some background showing here, some white space, and move on to the next layer. So we've finished up, we'll say, this layer. Now I could just leave this here and allow it to dry sitting on the plastic poster board. That's the surface that's underneath there, is a plastic poster board. What will happen is some of these areas will puddle and pool, and it will give you you know, kind of a little bit of an edge. You can kind of see it starting on this piece right here, which could be very desirable. You might really like that. And if you don't, it's a good idea to perhaps pick this up and go let it dry on a piece of paper or corrugated cardboard, something that's going to actually wick away some of the color and some of the moisture. And then you won't have as much of the puddling going on. I would not hang this vertical to dry, because with the watercolor, what's going to happen is everything's going to slide down with the pull of gravity. You also could iron this dry. Don't heat set it quite yet. You don't want it that hot while the scarf is damp, because you can scorch the scarf. You can heat set it with a very warm, with just a warm iron, and that will help it to dry. It'll take out any wrinkles that you have got forming, and it will start the setting process. So in the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this back over and hang it off my cart. And it's cleanup time again. Get ready for the next one. All right, while I'm cleaning, let's review what we're talking about with our wearable art tonight. I know lots of you guys have made wearable art in the form of jewelry. Lots of you guys are knitting and crocheting, and we've got some newbies who are reaching out and starting wearable art. learning new things. And that's always fun, always good. All right. I'm getting a little staining going on with the plastic poster board on this second level, but that's okay as long as I make sure that I've got as much color lifted off of it and moisture. I'm trying to dry it for the next level. So tell us about your favorite wearable art, or an artist you love that makes wearable art. Yes, jewelry, definitely, that counts. Jewelry is, of course, wearable art. And we'll continue with our silk painted scarf. All right, now, of course, I have another one. This one is similar to what we just did. And so these squares and rectangles have dried, and they're very watercolorish, aren't they? I love the soft, fuzzy edges and how we have just the variance in tones here. Okay, so we're going to go and kind of do exactly the same thing that we did with this level. Only we're going to do it with a little bit darker paint and a little bit more, let me bring this up, a little bit harder edged. So I'm bringing it straight up here. We're going to work out of the jars. And I'll just set it there, even though I know it's covering some. And you can see my jars have been well used. That's a good sign, right? I'm using a smaller brush now. I'm going to make these shapes a little bit smaller, and they're going to overlap other shapes. I still want to keep some white space in between, here and there, but I'm making these shapes so that they overlap some of the shapes below. And what's going to happen there is we're going to get that visual color mixing going on. Pull my scarf down here a little bit. Those first few, until we can get it a little bit anchored down again. The scarf wants to move a bit, but if we do that and then do another one up here, we'll get that anchored down so it doesn't scoot around like it's doing. So we'll have a color mixing going on right here, moving the teal over the blue with some different tones. Like so. I really am doing this randomly. And let's just say it bleeds out a little bit more than you wanted it to. Just turn it into a different shape. And at this point, you just kind of keep going, tying some of these shapes together. These are going to be a little harder edged. The scarf is dry underneath there. The paint is not as thin down as the first layer, so they're a little harder edged. Now you'll notice that the example that I have, the edges, comparatively, they're a little crisper than the ones that I'm going to be getting on the sample that I'm making here. And the reason is this is stretched and it isn't pulling up beneath on the plastic poster board. If you don't have plastic poster board, you can always use a piece of corrugated. However, corrugated cardboard is generally brown, so it's hard to see your colors. You either need to find a white piece or put paper Or I suppose you could paint it white as well. And we'll switch colors here, switch gears. I even left a little openness there. It's just always a surprise what's going to happen with this paint, what it's going to do. And you'll notice I have dribbled a couple more times, and dribbling just becomes another color block. I think I'll even put one up here. Like so. All right, and then the last color, of course, will be some green. And then, after I get some of these blocks in green, I'm going to use some of that negative space, some of that background that's showing through. And I love it when there's a pop of color, just a surprise. Contrast in art, of course, is our friend. We like contrast, right? I do. So I love the fact that we get strong colors and we get soft colors and we have harder edges and we have softer edges. But just to really give us a great contrast, a great pop, I'm going to use a little bit of this really hot orange. Now, I have an example up here in the front. Let me move this away. Okay, this scarf that I painted up here, my contrast, my pop, is lime green. And this is a longer scarf, more rectangular scarf. So instead of squares, there's more of a running pattern here. And there's a little bit of brushiness left on some of those strokes, but that used a lime green pop. I'm going to use some of this orange straight from the jar. So I want to make sure I get my brush cleaned out well. I was using green, and you know what would happen if we used orange with a little green in the brush? Yep, we would get a real ugly brown. All right, so now I'm just going to do some small little squares. Or you could do circles. I mean, if you really want contrast, why not? Here and there where there's open spots of that hot orange. This kind of leads our eye around the entire piece. Just kind of a little surprise here and there. We can even stick some on the edges. You can make some really small, some bigger, but we'll just add a few here and there. Okay. Well, I could keep working a little bit on this probably, but I think you guys have seen enough to get the idea. So now what we would do is, because we're actually finished, as I mentioned before, we can pick this up and go put it onto a cardboard box, a flat cardboard box, or roll paper perhaps, to give it the final dry, because underneath on the plastic, first of all, you know, it's going to puddle a little bit, and it also takes a little longer to dry that way. But I could stand here with a hair dryer and I could dry it that way. I would not hang it though, because gravity's going to pull the paint in one direction while it's wet, and you really will get, you know, some very, very runs in one direction. Now, once it's dry, then we're going to take a regular household iron, and usually there's a silk setting on an iron, right? So you would just take an iron for about 5 minutes and make sure that you turn it over, iron it from both sides. And that's all it's going to take to heat set this. And it's going to be washable. Now at first you might find it to be a little stiff, okay? And this is not bad. It's still very flowing, very much a silk scarf, but it doesn't feel like silk dye. So in order to soften it up, you could use a mild soap and wash it. Now you will see a little bit of a color discharge once it's been washed. A little bit, but not too much. Just don't use a harsh soap. And when I say a harsh soap, I mean a dishwashing soap, antibacterial hand soap. Those are very harsh soaps. A facial washing soap is usually very gentle. And there are also fabrics, cold water fabrics, soaps that are appropriate for silk. All right, let me just show you a couple of them, shall I? First of all, let's go back to this one right here. This is the long one, and this has been washed a few times. It definitely has a flow to it that you would not know is not silk dye. There's the one that I have here on my neck is the same color block technique that I was demonstrating today, but of course in some more earth tones. And then this piece over here. Let's get away from the blocking, shall we? You know, we've got our scary lady over here is holding this kind of a rosy scarf. Let me move this up just a little bit so that you guys can get a better look at this. All right, so this pattern is simply circles. It circles in 2 or 3 different colors, orange, and then the background is filled in with yellow and a little bit of chartreuse. Are we seeing that okay, Rick? Do I need to put something underneath that? Are we okay on that? All right, thank you. All right, so there's an option. In any case, you will want to try watercolor techniques with Dynaflow on silk. We're about at our end here, so you've got one last chance. If you're just joining us, we're talking about wearable art tonight. And if you will just tell us about wearable art that you do, wearable art that you love, maybe an artist that you love that creates wearable art that's really, really exciting. Let us know, and we've had some great discussion. And if you have any questions, we're hopefully going to get every one of them answered for you. And we'll do our drawing. Coming up on Thursday, we've got another great Facebook Live, and that starts at 4 o'clock this coming Thursday. And then we will be back again with more demonstrations for you. And thank you so much, you guys, for spending your evening with me. And I hope you really got inspired by this demonstration, and that you find out that silk painting is not nearly as scary as you think it might be. All right, well, thanks for joining us. We'll have the winner posted, and we'll see you next time.